Andy Smith, Ashcor.
Outstanding. Our levels look great here as we start the recording for the program. How are you doing today there, Mr. Smith?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Doing great. Now, before we started the interview, you mentioned that you are located in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which I, of course, kind of chuckled because I remember Chattanooga as one of those cities from my childhood I seem to remember. And talk to me a little bit about, first of all, Ashcor, the company that you're involved with, and then, just how Chattanooga, Tennessee got to be part of that existence, I guess.
Yeah, no, of course. So home for me is a little bit north of Atlanta, Georgia, so about an hour south of Chattanooga, and been in the clean energy space since 2001, promoting, selling, manufacturing clean and closed burners, low emission technology for a variety of industry segments. And we've always found a good kind of heart people location here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because we've got good schools that are training good welders and good equipment technicians, and we've had an abundance of just good folks who are really good quality people at what they do. So welding comes naturally. They love the trade, and so we found a good home here in Chattanooga, and we've been here for many years.
Well, that's great. You mentioned you've got other people across the country, either in and affiliated with the companies and more or less. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've got service is a big thing for us, so sales and service. So we've got those folks out locally in the markets that we play in. So upstream oil and gas, midstream oil and gas are big markets for us. Biogas is another one. So we've got folks spread out between the Bakken, so North Dakota, Wyoming, the Rockies region, so Colorado, down into the Permian, West Texas, that area. We've got folks, and then California as well. So we've got pockets of people spread out across the U.S., and so we can really be close to the customers and around what they're doing.
Talk to me a little bit about your customer. I've heard welding, I've heard clean energy, Ashcor. I mean, what is it specifically you guys are doing there? And talk to me about your customer a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So where it all kind of meets at the data point of all of those things is the product itself. And so the product is a low emission flare, and a flare is a device just to burn off the waste gas from a variety of different processes. And so our claim to fame, our real niche is enclosed combustors. So taking the flame and keeping it inside of an enclosure. And for us, that could be, if you can imagine, a stainless steel stack that's, let's say, 10 feet in diameter and 40 foot tall. And we have a multi-nozzle burner assembly at the bottom, some air louvers to control the amount of air coming in, kind of like a window blind going in, open and close, some thermocouples to measure temperature, and then typically an automatic pilot system so that we can control the pilot gas that ignites the burner itself. And so that's where the welding comes in. So the welders are making that product for us. Our service guys are working with our customers in the field, and our sales guys are working with our customers as well to supply that solution. So our customers are, let's say for the upstream oil and gas industry, are operators who are drilling or completing wells, and they've got an environmental either regulation or a permit or just a stewardship component to do things cleaner. And so that's where we come in. We come in and we not only eliminate the visibility of a flame that's out on the sites, but we emit far less than open flares would or venting would. So the environment gets cleaned up, the visual aspect gets cleaned up, the noise and smell pollution get cleaned up. And so it's a nifty little solution for what's going on out in the industry.
Talk to me a little bit about the innovation process here. Clean energy, of course, my mind goes right away to innovation, but as I'm learning, sometimes innovation is just an angle, or it's just enclosing something properly, or in some cases it's, grabbing technology from 100 years ago and just applying it to today. In other cases, it's small processors and smart pigs and data sensors, that sort of thing. How does innovation play into what you're talking about with your product and how you're assisting the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's multifaceted. So our customers, they come to us with a problem. The problem is what to do with the waste gas. So that's if they can put the processed gas back into a pipeline, then that's always preferred because now you're using that energy. If you could take that gas and use it in an engine or use it for other applications, so now you're getting a use out of it, and that's always preferred. But our angle is when you can't do those things, or you're at a remote site that has no infrastructure, and so, or you've inevitably got a waste gas stream that is not able to be used in those different apparatus, then we come into play. And so our innovation piece is really in the burner technology itself. And so, the evolution of kind of the flaring combustor world is, started with just venting through a pipe, and then they started igniting the end of that pipe, and now you've got just an open flare or pit flare. You started to see some engineered flares where you had actually some controllability to the openness, so you would manually light it as opposed to throwing a rag over it. And then the next thing was to just throw a shroud around it so you don't see it. And so that evolution was fine, but where we kind of fit in was at that point right there. So we take that enclosure or that need to take away the visibility of the flame, but then we add a burner technology and a controllability to it that provides an extremely clean burn. So we take all of the gases coming in and we burn 99.9% of what's there, we emit. So we have huge savings for the environment. And then we do it with a couple keywords in our industry are nitrous oxide, which is NOx, and then carbon monoxide, which is CO. So our job is to try to minimize those because there are regulations in certain pockets of the world that regulate the amount of NOx or CO or destruction efficiency that you could have.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're finding with flaring? Maybe you're not finding any, but in Texas, they're pretty much paying people to get it out of there so they could drill. And up in North Dakota, I think they're 12, 13 months in a row now. They haven't hit their flaring numbers in terms of capturing or whatever their criteria is. What challenges are you finding as far as getting some of that gas? I mean, there's plenty of it out there.
Yeah, there's plenty of it out there. So we're kind of finding two challenges. One is on the process side. So we're trying to take gas that's either very wet or very dirty, have a lot of condensates in it, has low pressure. So we're having to design solutions that are really flexible and able to take whatever we're getting, which oftentimes isn't necessarily known from the customer. So we're trying to take gases and pressures and different BTU values and these kind of things, and then still burn them as clean as we could if it was a constant flow of natural gas, so good clean gas. So we're able to overcome that, but that's a challenge that we're always battling is, we always say we have a standard system for a certain application. Every standard ends up being a little bit different because we have different features and functions to do what the customer needs. So that's one challenge. And then the other one is really innovation. So we're trying to always look and say, we're burning gas and that's a waste product. How can we then use that heat to do something else with it? And so we've done applications where in a landfill, for example, and even on oil and gas sites, when you have like dirty water, we'll take the waste heat from our combustor and then use 100% of that waste heat in order to act as the heat source for a heat exchanger or a concentrator to evaporate, whether it be leachate from a landfill or produce water that they're trucking away in the oil and gas sites. So we're just trying to always find a way to be cleaner and more efficient and solution-oriented.
You mentioned you're in a number of different plays, a number of different shale plays. Is your product able to be used in the different shale plays? Do you got to customize it for each one? I know when you go underground, it seems like every inch you got to customize. I guess I'm not really familiar if you have to above ground.
Yeah, no. So for us, the way we think about our enclosed combustors and vapor combustors is that we design everything based on power. So we take the type of gas, which changes by shale play or even sometimes within the shale play, and the flow rates, which changes site to site, and the pressure. And so we take those three constituents, and those things dictate a certain power of a combustor. So that combustor could be on one site, it could be 2-foot diameter and 20-foot tall, and then on another side it could be 12-foot diameter and 40-foot tall. And so what's customized within our system is really the burner head, and then the burner head is designed to entrain enough air so you get good mixing, and that dictates a certain stack size and stack height. So very similar situation, very similar technology, just customized by size, more or less, throughout the different regions and the plays, and depending on if they've got a heavy gas like they do in the Bakken, or more of a natural type gas that they can do in West Texas.
Sure. The wet gas and the dry gas, right? The different. Yeah, I'm actually at your website here, ashcor.com, and I'm just hovering above products, and it looks like you guys have got a number of different products to kind of go with a number of different, I guess, instances that would be needed. That sort of thing.
Yeah,
so.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. We kind of cut our teeth and really from a technology perspective in the enclosed combustor space. So that's trying to eliminate the visible flame and the noise and all that. And then we've been pulled really into other applications where you might migrate in a certain application to an open flare, maybe an air assist flare or a steam assist flare, when your gas volumes are just so high that you would need a football field full of enclosed combustors, when instead you could do it efficiently and cleanly with one open air assist product or steam assist flare. So we've been pulled into kind of filling up our bucket, anything sort of in that emission control category.
Sure.
We pride ourselves on really knowing how to engineer it and provide it.
The other part I wanted to ask you about when it comes to, the Bakken and Texas, use those as the differences. When it comes to the flaring, not only do you have the different types of gas, the wet gas in the Bakken, the dry gas down in Texas, but the regulations was the other side of things. And I noticed on your website, you guys have an entire, tab, I guess I'm not sure what those things are called at the top anymore on the navigation bar, field, whatever, devoted to regulations. And that's been my hunch, the last 5 years, it almost seems like more and more companies have to almost have some sort of regulatory knowledge from state to state, because it differs so much, it seems. What's your experience? And, talk to me a little bit about that regulations portion of your business.
Yeah, no, we got involved early on with years and years ago with the EPA, and so there it was really geared toward, what does the federal regulation look like across the board? And then inevitably what had started happening is the state level started picking up different regulations and enforcement levels and stringentness of what they're going to adhere to. And so what became kind of the umbrella EPA federal regulation that we had to comply with across the board, states started taking a more aggressive look at what they viewed as, good technology and good emission levels and even required emission levels. And so what that sort of catapulted was I don't know if it was an innovation or a proof of the pudding kind of thing, where, you're taking your technology into the states, you're proving it on an application and showing the emission levels that you could meet. And then states are really geared toward looking at that and setting levels. So California would do what they call a best available control technology. So they would look at technology and say, hey, you guys are really leading the innovation of combustors, and we're gonna set our regulations at that level. And so, state by state it's very different. So we have to stay on top of it from a state level, and because the technology will change. And in the Bakken you mentioned, they had stringent VOC emission levels and even some NOx emission levels that you just don't see down in Texas and New Mexico. California has its own set, the Rockies have its own set, and so it's very state driven. And then when we go outside internationally, Canada, each province has its own set of criteria as well. So we really look at it from a North American perspective, and it really breaks down into almost a regional regulatory requirement.
When it comes to the flaring side of things as well, what are you hearing from operators, from people? There's a big push towards renewable energy. There's a gentleman in Canada, I love his take on it, Terry Edom. He's a writer for the BOE report. He says there's such an abundance of natural gas, it should be considered not renewable, but free. And so it should be kind of lumped in with the renewables a little bit because it's clean.
Sure.
We're not a political program, but we have started to pontificate a little bit by just asking the question, and I'd be curious to get your response on this. What would a world look like if we took 50% of the subsidies from solar and wind, who've had 40 years of subsidies? And it's not to pick on solar and wind, it's to say that you've had 40 years of subsidies, and right now we have this issue called flaring. And if some of these science projects and some of these value-added natural gas companies got a little boost of capital, who knows what could happen? Who knows what great product could be developed or some new efficient form of energy? And who knows? Maybe we'd all have indoor gardens in our basement by something. The energy companies, they're taxed quite a bit. In North Dakota, I know that they're taxed 11.5% with the extraction and production tax. And then you put on, that they make sure that the community centers lights are on, and the churches can have bake sales, and the little league teams have baseball uniforms. And at the end of the day, there's just not a lot of money for R&D unless you're at $70 plus oil. What would a world look like if, a natural gas company like yourself or some of your colleagues that are sleeping on well sites, checking monitors, if they got a little bit of a subsidy money, for 5 years, what would a world look like with natural gas and the flaring and, a company like yours? Or I'll even go a step further. The mineral rights people would get paid, and now the local cafes and the Hardware Hanks would get a little insurge of money too. So,
sure.
Anyway, a very long-winded question to basically say, I'm not trying to be political here, but you're in the industry, so would you understand what I'm talking about? Not see that, or talk to me a little bit about it?
No, it's an excellent question, very well articulated. No, so when we kind of embrace from the industry of really taking a clean technology, even be it a flare or a combustor, to the market, we were really at the time leading the innovation, right? And so what we were finding, though, is that companies were saying, hey, we don't need that, or we're not going to pay the little bit of a premium for that, and we actually just want to burn it with a pit flare or anything we can to get away from it as economical as possible. And so that actually pulled us backwards a bit as far from a technology perspective. And so you find yourself thinking, wow, just the question you're asking yourself, if the resources are there to really plow in and bring creativity and innovation into a space that is hungry and eager to do this, it's unstoppable what could potentially happen. Because if I'm out on a random restaurant and meet a random stranger and they say, hey, what do you do for a living? We say, oh, we supply flares or burners, and we do it environmentally friendly way, and we're a emission control company. The first question 95% of the people say is, why are you burning it off? We should be using that energy, and that's I think that's the gap and the hunger that people outside the industry have, and then that we inside the industry also have. Is just figuring out how to bridge that gap. And yeah, it's a big, broad question, but definitely I think we're all aligned in that direction.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting part of it too, is the connection part, and that's actually one of my criticisms, and it falls on me too, because I'm in the communication industry, and for the last 7, 8, 9 years, it's been primarily oil and gas, and there has been a disconnect between the industry and the average folk. I mean, I saw it in Colorado happen right before my eyes when I would go there and talking to people in the breakfast bars, and people are looking over their shoulder before they say the oil and gas industry, that they work in there. And, when I grew up, the light switch was never political, and now it is. And that's just it's a new dynamic, I think, that the industry needs to accept and figure out a new way to connect. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know, and to get to gain that positive outlook again on what the industry is doing and can do, and not necessarily all the negatives connotated with it. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like agriculture. A lot of people don't associate, the farms with the supermarket and and hamburgers and everything else like that. And in some instances, good, but in others, it's kind of like, okay, there is that much of a disconnect to where you take for granted that much that your light switch turns on and everything else. Anyways, we're not here to solve the world's problems. Lord knows we don't have enough time. So
no, but you're right. It is about communication, and that's a big thing. And kind of going back to the regulatory piece on our website, that's what we're trying to do with that piece and that component, is really trying to educate folks who are at the oil companies and may not know the federal or the state regulations or what's required. And so it's that finding a way to kind of communicate and bridge that gap.
So the $1 million question, everybody's big push is clean and green and Mean Joe Green. So what do you have? They like that, the little Steelers nod there. I mean,
there you go.
If you had to describe your company as being clean and energy efficient and everything, which you do, give me an elevator pitch on that. A 30-second, a 60-second overview of why you can say you're trying to, or you guys are, cleaning the planet, why you're helping the planet.
Yeah, no, we spent years developing technology, and it's really in the burner technology and how you assemble that into a device or a solution. But perfecting the gas coming from the source, whatever that may be, mixing it with the proper amount of air, trying to take a single gas stream and break it into really an infinite number of burner flames, provides the cleanest combustion that you can get. And so we're trying to emulate that in a practical way, given the pressures and the flows and the gas compositions and the water and the dry gas and all of those parameters, trying to innovate to do that as clean and flexible and customer friendly, so that they can, our device doesn't become a limiting factor, so that ultimately what's being burned through our flare comes out with, a 99.99% destruction efficiency, so very little amount of unburned hydrocarbon, as low as NOx as achievable and as low as CO as achievable, so that the result is 21 times greater impact on the environment than if you were to just vent the gas.
How's it working on the bottom lines for companies? That's what they want to know. Are you saving money? Is it a 10-year process like a solar panel? Talk to me about how you're, helping companies sharpen their bottom lines, I guess. I assume you are.
Yeah.
That's otherwise you probably wouldn't be in business.
No. So they so in order for an operator or a landfill or any industries that we play in, a mine gas or barge truck loading, anything like that, they've got to have a certain amount of control devices in place in order to ensure that they're not exceeding state or federal permitting limits or emission limits and that kind of thing. So where we come in is really on two fronts. One is, step one is say, hey, we have a control device that will allow you to just meet the permit requirements and you're good to go. So now it's time to have a product or solution that's as cost competitive as possible. The real advantage is when we can say, hey, traditional technology will allow you to reach this operating level, and then you're going to max out on your emissions. But if you come in with this control device, which is much more environmentally friendly, lower NOx, lower CO, higher destruction efficiency, now you can increase your production and still stay within the permit limit. Now you, Mr. Operator, are making money. And so that's the real win-win-win for us, for the customer, when that happens.
Winding down here with final thoughts. Anything that we didn't bring up? Anything that you feel we should reiterate? I like to give guests kind of the final thought, the final word. That way there's not a question framed by me. So the floor is yours, sir.
No, I would just say thank you. It's interesting to always. Everybody loves to talk about their baby, and this has definitely been, within Ashcor, we've got folks who most all of the leadership team have over 30 years experience. And so we love doing this. We love the innovation part. We love the solution part. And so, no, we're happy to always talk about the platform, answer questions about it. And then, like we kind of talked about too, is trying to communicate that message continuously and as clearly as we can and in the right groups, because there is a variety of stakeholders within each region. And so, no, it's a fun journey as we kind of have evolved from venting to flaring to now trying to really put low emission technology out in the market and then eventually using that gas whenever possible down the road. And so, no, it's a great journey, and we certainly love this industry.